Skeletal system. Skeletal system is the system of bones, associated cartilages and joints of human body. It's the hard framework of human body around which the entire body is built. Joints make this the hard and rigid skeleton allow different types of movements. So it's very important. Division of the human skeleton. Axial skeleton, which consists of the following structures. Skull, which is the bone of the head that consists of 22 different bones in the cranium and the face. Vertebral column, the flexible column that connects the trunk of human body to the skull and appendages, is composed of 33 vertebrae, which are 12 thoracic, 7 cervical, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 4 coccygeal. Thoracic cage, the bony cage that encloses vital human organs, is formed by the sternum and ribs. There are 12 pairs of ribs that are divided into 3 groups: true ribs, false ribs, and floating ribs. Appendicular skeleton, which consists of the following structures. 2 shoulder girdles, which are the clavicle and scapula. It attaches the upper limb to body trunk. 2 upper limbs, each one consists of 30 bones. These bones are humerus, ulna, radius, 8 carpals, 5 metacarpals, and 14 phalanges. 2 pelvic girdles join with each other at symphysis pubis. Each pelvic girdle is a single bone in adults, hip bone, and is made up of 3 components: ilium, ischium, and pubis. 2 lower limbs, each lower limb consists of 30 bones. These bones are femur, tibia, patella, 7 tarsals, 5 metatarsals, and 14 phalanges. Functions of human skeleton. It represents the strength, support, and shape of the body. It also protects the delicate vital organs as heart and lungs in the thoracic cage. Act as levers and provide the different movements by attachment to the muscles. And have a role in production of red blood cells, through bones like the sternum and upper end of tibia, which have hemopietic activity. Types of bones according to shape. Long bones is the bone which its length exceeds its breadth and thickness. Examples: clavicle, humerus, radius, ulna, femur, tibia, fibula, metacarpals, metatarsals, and phalanges. Parts of the long bone. Each long bone has a shaft and 2 ends, which are usually articular. The shaft, also called diaphysis, is a tube of compact bone, the cavity of which is known as a medullary or marrow cavity. The cavity contains either red blood-forming or yellow fatty bone marrow, or both. The shaft is surrounded by a periostem for the attachment of muscles and tendons to bone. The upper and lower ends, epiphysis, are wider part of cancellous or spongy bone covered by a thin layer of compact bone. Epiphyses of a growing bone are either entirely cartilaginous or separated from the shaft by cartilaginous epiphyseal plates. Metaphysis, the growing part of the shaft adjacent to the epiphyseal disc, contains the growing zone and newly formed bone. Short bones consist of spongy bone and marrow enclosed by a thin layer of compact bone. Example: carpal bones of the hands and tarsal of the feet. Flat bones consist of 2 layers of compact bone with intervening spongy bone and marrow. Examples: the ribs, sternum, scapulae, lateral part of the clavicle, and many bones of the skull. Irregular bones that do not readily fit into other groups. Examples: many of the skull bones, the vertebrae. Sesamoid bones, which are a type of short bone embedded within tendons or joint capsules. Examples: in the hands and feet, although the patella is the largest sesamoid bone. Accessory bones, also called supernumerary, are not regularly present. They occur chiefly in the hands and feet. They include some sesamoid bones and certain ununited epiphyses in the adult. They are of forensic importance, when seen in radiograms, may be mistaken to fractures. Pneumatic bones are bones containing air cavities. Examples: some bones of the skull which contain the paranasal sinuses, like maxillary, frontal, sphenoid, and ethmoid sinuses. Sutural bones, also called wormian bones, are very small bones located within the sutural joints. Examples: between the cranial bones of the skull. Types of bones according to their development. Membranous bones. They ossify by intramembranous ossification from mesenchymal condensations in the intrauterine life. Examples: bones of the skull and facial bones. Cartilaginous bones. They ossify from a cartilage model by intracartilaginous ossification. Examples: bones of limbs, vertebral column and thoracic cage. Membranocartilaginous bones. They ossify partly from cartilage and partly from mesenchymal condensations. Examples: clavicle, mandible, occipital, temporal and sphenoid, etc. Types of bones according to their structure. Compact bone, which the ratio between bone substance to bone space is more than 1, this means that there is more bone tissue. Spongy bone, which the ratio between bone substance to bone space is less than 1:1, this means that there is more empty space. Arterial supply of long bone. Diaphyseal or nutrient artery enters the shaft obliquely through a nutrient foramen till it reaches the medullary canal. It then divides into ascending and descending branches till the metaphysis. Metaphyseal arteries. They are direct branches from the neighboring systemic vessels. They anastomose with the epiphyseal arteries, only after ossification of the epiphyseal plate of cartilage. Epiphyseal arteries. They arise from periarticular vascular arcades and supply the epiphysis. Periosteal arteries. They arise from the periosteal plexus of and supply mainly the cortex. Nerve supply of long bone. Many nerve fibers accompany the blood vessels of bone. Most such fibers are vasomotor, but some are sensory, ending in periostom and in the adventitia of blood vessels. Some of the sensory fibers are pain fibers. Periostom is especially sensitive to tearing or tension. Ossification. It's the bone formation which starts at the 6th week in the uterus by the primary centers of ossification. It continues after birth by the activity of secondary centers of ossification. Types. Membranous ossification. It occurs in bones of skull vault, the face and shaft of the clavicle. Cartilaginous ossification. It occurs in most of long bones, ribs and vertebrae. Cartilage. Resilient connective tissue of cells and embedded in a firm, gel-like intercellular matrix. Types. Hyaline cartilage. Represent most articular cartilages. Examples include the costocartilages, the trachea and bronchi, and most of the nose and larynx. Fibrocartilage. Bundles of collagenous fibers are the prominent constituent of the matrix of fibrocartilage, in certain cartilaginous joints, for example pubic symphysis, temporomandibular joint. Elastic cartilage. The fibers in the matrix are elastic, and such cartilage rarely if ever calcifies with age. Examples include the auricle and auditory tube, the epiglottis of the larynx. Joint. It's the point at which two or more bones make contact or articulate. Fibrous joints. In this joint the bones are united by fibrous tissue. No movement is allowed at the fibrous joint. Sutures. They have limited movement until about 20 years old, only found between the bones of the skull. Synsmoses have more intervening connective tissue. Examples include the inferior tibiofibular joint and the tympanostadial joint. Gomphosis, immovable joint between teeth and their sockets. The fibrous connection is the periodontal ligament. Cartilaginous joints. In this joint the bones are united either by hyaline cartilage or by fibrocartilage. Primary cartilaginous joints. This type is strong and immovable because the bones are united by hyaline cartilage. This type is temporary and is replaced later. Examples: epiphysis and diaphysis of a growing long bone, costochondral joint and the first chondrosternal joint. Secondary cartilaginous joints. They permit limited movements because the articular surface is covered by a thin layer of hyaline cartilage and the bones are united by fibrocartilage. These joints are permanent and persist throughout the life of an individual. Typically these joints occur in the median plane of the body. Examples: symphysis pubis, symphysis menti of the mandible, mandibulosternal joint, intervertebral joints between the vertebral bodies. Synovial joint. Freely movable joint filled with synovial fluid. They are the main type of joint found around the body. Possess a cavity and are specialized to permit more or less free movement. The articular surfaces of the bones are covered with hyaline cartilage, and the bones are united by a joint capsule and ligaments. The joint capsule consists of an outer, fibrous layer, with a vascular, connective tissue lining its inner surface, synovial membrane. The synovial membrane produces the synovial fluid, synovia, that fills the joint cavity and lubricates the joint. The joint cavity is sometimes subdivided by fibrocartilaginous discs or menisci. Types. Uniaxial joint, has one axis of rotation and one degree of freedom. Examples: hinge or pivot joints. Biaxial joint, has two axes of rotation and 2 degrees of freedom. Examples: ellipsoid or saddle joint. Polyaxial joint, has more than 2 axes of rotation or degrees of freedom. Examples: ball and socket joints. Types of synovial joints according to the shape of the articular surfaces. Plane joint. In this joint the articular surfaces permit gliding or slipping in any direction. Examples: joints between articular processes of vertebrae and joints between carpal and tarsal bones. Hinge joint. It is uniaxial and permits movement in one transverse plane. Examples: elbow, ankle joints and interphalangeal joints. Pivot joint. It is uniaxial. It is a cylindrical surface rotates within a ring of bone and fibrous tissue. It permits movement in one vertical plane, as pronation and supination. Examples: superior radial nerve joint and atlantoaxial joint. Ellipsoidal, condyloid, joint. It is biaxial. It has one convex surface articulate with a concave surface. Flexion and extension and adduction and abduction. Examples: wrist joint and metacarpophalangeal joints. Saddle, or sellar, joint, is biaxial. Both articular surfaces are concavo-convex. Examples: carpometacarpal joint of the thumb. Ball and socket, or spheroidal, joint is polyaxial. A spheroidal surface of one bone moves within the socket of the other bone about 3 axes, polyaxial. Flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, and rotation can occur, as well as circumduction. Examples: shoulder joint and hip joint. Bicondylar joint. The joint is formed articulating with 2 concave surfaces. Examples: knee joint, 1 capsule, and temporomandibular joint, 2 capsules. Intra-articular structures. The synovial joint may contain menisci, ligaments, intra-articular discs, pads of fat and synovial folds that help in spreading of synovial fluid and assist in lubrication. Stability of the joint have a great clinical importance and explains why some joints are more prone to dislocation and injury than others. The factors which stabilize the synovial joints are: bony factors. The shape, size and arrangement of articular surface determine whether they fit together perfectly or not. Ligamentous factor which prevent excessive movement that could damage the joint. Muscular factor. The tone of the surrounding muscles contributes greatly to the stability of the joint. Blood supply of the joint. It takes arterial supply via arteries which arise from the vessels around the joint that form anastomoses and pierce the capsule, which supply all intracapsular structures except cartilages. The articular veins accompany the articular arteries and are also found in the synovial membrane, nerve supply of the joints. The joints have a rich nerve supply provided by articular nerves supplying their muscles. The nerves of a joint transmit impulses which play a key role in proprioception. Hilton's which law states that the nerves supplying a joint also supply the muscles moving the joint and the skin covering their distal attachments.